Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to model and sculpt a tree. We'll be setting up our base mesh, and then we'll be going into sculpting mode, and we'll sculpt out all the fine details, just going over some basic sculpting tools. It's important to use a reference when modeling. So in order to do that in Cinema 4D, we'll have to go to one of the views, such as the back view or the front view. And what we'll do is we'll go to Shift V, and that'll bring up viewport settings. If you go in the back tab, we'll have this image field. So we can just click on that, go to tree.psd, and you'll see my little drawing that I did for the tree. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just a cube, and we're just going to extrude and rotate in order to make this twisting tree design. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to resize this. Let me zoom in a bit. I'm going to resize this cube to about the size of our trunk at the bottom here. Now I want to make sure I go to our top view just to make sure that I am working within a square. Okay, that's about right. So let me maybe shift this over a bit. Let me make the cube editable. And I'm going to be working in polygon mode. And when you use the rectangle selection, make sure you have the only select visible elements turned off and tolerance selection unchecked. So we can grab this top polygon. I'm just going to move it over. I'm going to resize it using the transform tool, and I'm just going to rotate. And this is going to be sort of the flow of building up this tree, is extruding, D on your keyboard, resizing it so it makes it a little bit thinner, and we'll try to get it within our reference, and rotation. In fact, let me go to UL and rotate our trunk a little bit. And let me take a look in perspective mode. We're gonna be going into perspective mode and our front view quite often, back and forth, in order to just to make sure that we're looking pretty good in terms of our relation to making sure things are square, making sure things are just looking good. So we're going to be going back and forth between those views. And like I said, we're just going to be rotating. Now this way, I'm going to rotate it a little bit this way. I'm going to rotate it and sort of twist it around. Pull this up a little bit. Take a look in the perspective mode. And just kind of follow this along. Okay, maybe I made it a little bit too small, so let me just kind of resize that a bit. Rotate. in perspective mode. See how that looks, and just kind of turn around and just kind of take a look at it from all angles. You know, usually when I'm modeling, I want to take a look at all the different angles as I'm going, because if you work in one view, you might realize that you made a mistake. If you just kind of take a look at it every few minutes, you can see if you're making a mistake or not. And so I'm just gonna keep going around, keep twisting, keep resizing. Shrink that, rotate this up a little bit. Take a look in this view. You can see that we're kind of having this little bit of a big shape here. So I'm gonna have to smooth that out a little bit. Rotate this around. Keep extruding. And in fact, I want to rotate this a little bit towards this way a little bit. Extrude, rotate this around, pull this back over here, twist. Rotate, twist this around. Make this a little bit bigger. Kind of lost our shape just a little bit. Okay. So I'll make some adjustments here, but we're looking good. And these side branches I'll take a look at in just a minute. Let me make this a little bit smaller, twist this around. And so it's just kind of going through this process of just kind of building up this tree. Oops. Careful you don't resize in the wrong axis. Okay, looking good here. It's kind of a big bulky thing here, but that's going to be where we're going to have some side branches. Pull this back, and if you need to, you can go to line mode and do loop selection and just kind of shrink down some areas that got a little too bulky, and kind of shrink this down and even things out a little bit. Like here seems a little odd. And just keep in mind that the drawing is just a reference. And I think I want to put in just one more extrusion. Pull this up a little bit. Okay. And now let's do some side branches. So I'm going to put one, let's start at the bottom here. I'm going to put one right here. So it's actually this polygon. Let me go back to the front view. And it's going to pull out from this end, from this side. So let me resize. Move it over a little bit. Let me take a look. Oh. And this is why you got to take a look at all the different angles. And what I want to do is I just want to square this guy up a little bit. So we kind of lost its shape a tad. So I want to get back to a quad, a rectangle. So I'm just kind of shaping this up a little bit. Take a look around and you can see that we kind of lost a little bit. And you can kind of pull in this axis and now square it up a little bit. Pull this out. Take a look in our front view. Twist it around. Rotate. Move this over. Resize. And it's just going around and just kind of twisting it a bit. And I'm going to take a look at perspective mode. Okay, we're moving along. It's a little tough to kind of get this. Yeah, this is looking a little funky here. So I went a little too far with the twisting part. So just keep that in mind. You wanna give it that twist, and you can see we're losing a little bit of the shape here, but we can adjust that when we do a little bit of sculpting. But you wanna do it a little bit more gradually. See, if you start twisting it too much, these polygons start getting stretched and elongated. So you just want to be careful about that. What you can do, what will start happening is we'll have these creases when we subdivide. You know, like right here, we're gonna have an issue right there. This whole area right here is gonna be a little bit of an issue. It's not a big deal. We can adjust that, but just as a you want to try to get it done correctly as you're going. You have these very elongated and twisted polygons because we're at such a low resolution. So be a little bit more gradual, be a little bit more steady as you're pulling these out. So what I want to do is give this one more. That's about good. And let's pull one out here on the other side of this. So this polygon right here. And I'm going to pull this out. And I'm going to do something similar to what I did before. And that's kind of square this guy up a little bit. And again, if you need to go into point mode, and just get this a little bit, as we lost a little bit of our shape of our quads, our squares. So just kind of make some adjustments here. You can see we lost this point. It's a little too high. So let's extrude that out. Let's go into front view. And keep going with our twisting, shrinking, and extruding technique. And let me resize that bit. Take a look here. All right, not too bad. Yeah, this one's getting a little bit off, but I'll take a look at that. Twist. I'm going to rotate this one the other way. Pull this back over here. Twist, and then keep going back and forth in our perspective mode. Let me pull this one up a little bit, resize, and then twist, and just give it another extrusion. And we got one more branch here, we got another one over here, so let's get this one. There's perspective mode, and that looks about right. Square this one up. And just as before, I'm just kind of reshaping this a little bit. Let's go to front view, and let me rotate this one around. Twist this. Extrude, twist, resize, rotate it so it's a little bit more level. Extrude, twist, extrude, twist, and rotate upwards. And let me pull this back a little bit and up. Extrude, twist, and rotate upwards. Resize. Let me pull this up a little bit. Extrude, rotate, resize, and one more time. Let me rotate this up a little bit, and maybe one more, just for good measure. Okay, it's looking good. I like everything so far, except for this little area here and maybe right here. I want to put a knot here, so I just want to keep in mind maybe putting in some geometry in here. Let me inner extrude, size this up a little bit. rotate this polygon. Inner extrude. And then extrude inwards instead of outwards. And then another time, resize this a little bit, and then an inner extrude, something like that. Just keep in mind when you're extruding to make sure your create caps is unchecked. That way you won't be able to see that hole. Okay. And let me go to the front view. We have this one little side branch that's going upwards. So let me take a look in perspective mode. I think I want to put it on this side though. So I'm going to extrude, kind of shape it a little bit. Resize this, rotate it around. Resize, let me twist this. Pull this back and rotate this a little bit. Extrude. Rotate, and let me rotate a little bit this way. Pull this up. I'm going to twist this. Pull this back a little bit. Resize. Extrude. Twist. Resize. And rotate a bit. And then one more time. Resize. Okay, so I have everything kind of set. What I'm going to do in the next lesson is I'm going to put this into a sculpting tag, or put a sculpting tag on this object, and we can just name this tree. And what I'm going to do is start sculpting out a lot of the twisting of the bark, and we'll do some patterns. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to put on some foliage and just kind of give it a sense that there's foliage. You can branch off into two different ways. You could actually keep this design as is and go and form a more low poly look. And I'll show you when I start bringing in the spheres. If I bring in lines, NB on your keyboard, and we'll go to about 12 segments. And let me go to front view. Bring this up and just kind of resize it. Make it a little bit smaller. And just kind of bring it into place. Go into perspective mode and just kind of pull it back a bit. Oh. I actually made a mistake. I do want to make this... Sorry, I had to undo. I do want to make this a hexahedron. I forgot, I missed that step. And we'll still go at 12 segments. The reason why I like using the hexahedron is when you go into standard, you just get these poles here at the top. And I just don't particularly like working with these little triangles. So that's why I always go to hexahedron. The issue with hexahedron is, if you really look at it, it's basically a rounded off cube. But we have these little tiny poles here. We have, and those could cause some issues, you know, if you're going for a very smooth look. But I prefer having everything all quads. So that's why I did that. I apologize for having you to go back and undo, but I think it's important to keep that. So let me go back and just resize this as per our reference. And pull this back. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, so like I was saying, you can go for a more low poly look, and you can duplicate these, or you can do what I'm going to do next, which is to go for a more digital sculpted look. And we'll be using the sculpting tools that we have in Cinema 4D. And I'm going to duplicate these, pull this out, pull this up, maybe make this a little bit larger. And you can, you know, really make as many of these as you want. I'm going to make another one here. Pull this forward. I'm going to duplicate this and make this one a little bit smaller. And you can spend a little bit more time. Oops. A little bit more time getting this to the way that you want it. I think I'm going to pull this one over a little bit. Make sure I'm in object mode. And so anyway, maybe make this a little bit smaller. Let me zoom out. I feel like this one's just kind of floating. So I'm just going to resize it and pull it back. Tab. Kind of follow our reference a little bit better. Yeah, it's looking a lot better. Let me just move this up a little bit. Make sure that's connected. Okay, so I didn't want to spend too much time on this. Okay, so in the next lesson, I'm just going to be putting this into a sculpting tag, and we'll start sculpting out a little of these details on the tree. Okay, let's start sculpting our tree. So select the object that you want to sculpt and make sure it's editable. We're going to be working on the tree first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide these foliage. So I can just concentrate just on the tree. So we're going to go to the sculpting layout in Cinema 4D. And if you subdivide, if you go back to objects, you're going to see it puts in a sculpting tag. And then you can start using a lot of these tools within Cinema 4D in order to do some sculpting. Now, right now, there's just isn't enough geometry in order to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in some subdivisions, and that's going to smooth everything out, similar to a subdivision surface. And you can see how we have a lot more subdivision, a lot more polygons in order to work with. But if I start adding in some lines, say if I use the knife tool, it just simply isn't enough in order to see any detail. So we're just going to have to add in more subdivisions in order to see our lines. So I'm going to click NA on the keyboard to take off lines so we could start seeing some of our sculpting details. So if I go to our drawing, and if I go to objects and I hide our tree, you can kind of see the lines that I made and how it follows up the twisting part of our tree. And I want to maintain those lines throughout in the digital sculpt. So I'm going to bring back our tree, and I'm going to go back to our sculpting and make sure our tree is selected. And so I'm just going to start bringing in some lines using the knife tool. Be careful of the pressure. If you put too much of a pressure, you can see it digs in pretty deeply. And you also want to keep an eye on the size of your brush. And what we want to do is we want to follow along our tree trunk, and just kind of give it this kind of sweeping lines. Now you'll notice still that we're starting to run a little bit out of geometry. And what I want to try to do is follow the lines that we made with when we did our modeling. And that's going to help alleviate any faceting that might occur. So I'm just going to follow this up, and I'll go back and forth between lines just to see how that looks. But really, I want to see how this looks as I'm sculpting without the lines. Now, you don't have to be skilled at drawing in order to be a 3D artist, but I do feel that it helps. When I started out doing a lot of drawing, and a lot of the skills, a lot of the things that I was taught in a lot of the art classes and drawing classes that I had in college, still applies to the 3D world. And one of them is, don't get stuck on one area of your model, and constantly be moving around your, in this case, a model, but when I was drawing, to keep moving around the paper and keep working on the drawing on different angles. Don't, if you're drawing a tree, don't just keep drawing a branch and keep adding in details. You want to keep going around your model. And the reason why that helps is that you don't want to get stuck on a detail and then not see the larger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. And in this case, we want to kind of have this twisting bark lines on our tree. So constantly pull out, same thing when I was drawing, you would step back and just take a look at the drawing as a whole and see how it's progressing. So I do feel that some traditional art and drawing will definitely help you in your digital artistry. So I'm just kind of going back and forth. I want to go back to the original drawing again, and just kind of remember where this is twisting, and see, I like how this is kind of like pulling upwards, and I want to try to mimic that again. So that was around here, so I wanted to start pulling these lines upward, around and up. And don't feel, you can definitely crisscross in some of these areas and it will make some interesting shapes. I really enjoy digital sculpting because it kind of brings back some of the artistic work that I used to do with just painting and drawing. And even though I love the accuracy of modeling and the very specific nature of moving points and manipulating polygons, it is fun to just be able to just put on your headphones, listen to your music, and just, do some sculpting. So what I'm doing is I'm just follow along this tree and just keep pulling back and just kind of keep taking a look and, making sure I don't forget a lot of the back areas, even though we're only going to be, taking a look at the front, and this is what I consider the front. You don't want to neglect any back areas or the side or anything. You want to make sure you touch on every aspect of your model. It just won't look right. So there really isn't any my technique is really just kind of putting in lines and just kind of seeing what looks cool. See, around here, this branch, it's starting to get to the point where I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to decrease the size of my brush in order to get the lines that I want. And I'm just kind of crisscrossing around, and maybe the pressure is a tad up. And if you make a mistake, that's not a problem. You can just go to smoothing, and right now the pressure is way up. Bring that all the way down, and the size is too big of your brush. So I found when it comes to the pressure of the smoothing, bring it as far down as you can possibly go, where you start seeing some an effect, because you don't want to smooth it out too much. Like for example, if I'm like up here, look how quickly it smooths things out. So I found that bringing it down pretty low allows me to gradually smooth out lines that I feel are a little too rough, a little too deep. It helps with some of this faceting. And I can go up another subdivision. But right now we're at poly count is in the 52,000. It's just something to consider when you're sculpting. This isn't really a big deal, but in this particular model, but you can definitely get some very high polygon counts on other models. So you want to consider that, especially the particular thing that you're making this for. This is just, you know, for example purposes and demos. But if you're going to be putting it into a scene, and I'm not really liking, just kind of, I may have to smooth this out a little bit. Kind of twist this a little bit more. So if you're making it in a scene where, you know, a visual effects scene, you know, that's a lot of work that you're going to have the viewport, you know, using, you know, every animation that you do, every frame is going to be calculating all this geometry. So it's definitely something you want to keep in mind in terms of how much resolution that you're going to be putting it in. Okay, so moving along, I want to continue sculpting this out. And I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want you to be watching me do something so kind of repetitive. But I just wanted to show you some of the ideas here. Now, quickly, I just want to wrap this around, and then I want to show you a few other little tools in the sculpting, the tool set that we have here. And I just want to do some like crisscross design down at the bottom here. Kind of twist into this hole. It's looking pretty cool. And just want to get a little bit of this bottom part here. Okay, so now once you feel like you have your lines in, you can also use this pinch, which I really like because, and again, this is another one of those tools where you want to back off the pressure a little bit. What that's going to do, that's going to, as the tool is named, it pinches in, and it allows for a deeper and a more clear, sharper line when you use the knife tool. So, and I can go up another level and see how that looks. And you can go back and forth in order to see a little bit more detail. So go over your lines a little bit, and maybe I can bring up the pressure a bit. Go over your lines a little bit, and now we'll have a more deeper cut in the line. I'm going to smooth this out a little bit. I'm not particularly liking how this came out. I feel it's a little too many lines here. Okay, so one other thing that I wanted to show you, and before I get to the foliage, the kind of an abstract shrubbery on top of our tree, just wanted to show you one other thing. And if you go into the pool or one of your tools here, you'll have stamp. And if you go to content browser and presets, sculpting, and I'm going to dock this to our side here. I'm going to turn off the tree view, and I'm going to go to sculpt brush presets, and you'll have a bunch of these different images that you can put into your tool. So I'm going to choose, I think it might have been organic tree bark, that's what it was. I just chose one. You can choose one of these two, and you can see when you double click on it, you're going to get this image across your entire viewport. And so where you use your tool is going to show up where this pattern is or where this image is. So for an example, and I'm in the pool tool, and that's going to put that pattern, that's going to sculpt that pattern onto your tree. So if you go around, it will add in that detail, and it takes off that smoothing that you have. And if you go to another tool, you can see how that is coming through. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go quickly across our image, and you can spend as much time adding in this detail. And if you feel like you went a little too far with it and it's not looking the way that you want, you can simply smooth this out. And then try again. So, like I said, don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I just wanted to kind of go over and just kind of give it a just a once over with that brush. Now, what I want to do next is I want to go to one of our little foliage shrubbery things that we have here, and let's go to object. Like I said, you have to make this editable, so make that editable and then subdivide, and you'll see it has another sculpting tag on this object. So what I want to do here is pretty simple. Let me add in some subdivisions, and similar thing with the knife tool, and let's bring this pressure size up, or the brush size up, and gonna need some more subdivisions. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add in some kind of wispy curve shapes and kind of have this go around these curved lines, and just kind of have this go around our little ball here. And you can also shape this if you want to using the grab tool. Kind of give it a little bit more shape instead of your typical round ball. And I advise using a larger brush size to get some very global shape, because if you go too small, then it starts getting a little lumpy. So I don't like to spend too much time shaping it, just to give it some mess it up a little bit and give it up a little less of a round shape, or a circular, a spherical shape. So, and you want to hit the back as well. So just kind of going through this, and you can also do something similar with the tree bark that I did with the tree bark. You can kind of add in one of those stamps, those textures that we put on for adding in the tree bark. You can try something like that, or one of the other sculpting tools that we have, in order to give it that nice pattern and give it a little bit more texture. So that's really it. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time. I just wanted to show you just a starter on the sculpting tool sets that we have here. I want to go a lot more in-depth detail with the sculpting, because I know that there's better software out there like ZBrush and Mudbox, but if you're new to digital sculpting, the fact that there is less tools to worry about can be a benefit. And ZBrush has some really interesting brushes, but it's also a very unintuitive user interface. Whereas you're already in Cinema 4D, you're already working within Cinema 4D, and to use these very basic sculpting, but they're very powerful in terms of their settings and what they can do. I haven't even gone into a lot of these things, using steady stroke, and you have this line that gives you a little bit better detail, a little bit more accuracy. So you can see that line. If you can really bring it up, you can see where that line is. So I mean, there's plenty of things to use to help you out in this. But I just wanted to give you just a quick starter on modeling this tree and some digital sculpting. If I go back to our startup layout, and I can bring in these other balls, you can sculpt these out, or what you can do is you can also, let me go back to sculpting, the sculpting layout, and I'm on this sphere, if I go to startup, if I go to tools, create polygon copy, it'll make a polygon version of what I just made and all this sculpted. So what that means is I can resize this and I can then copy it and resize it and put that in, rotate it around a little bit. Right now you're seeing both the sculpt and the polygon copy. But, what you can do is at that point, you can then move that around into the other position if you didn't want to sculpt each individual one. So anyway, sorry for another long-winded tutorial. I'm really trying to make these a little bit faster, but I just get into this kind of stuff and I just enjoy making these tutorials and talking about them. So again, I'll see you in the next lesson. See you in the next tutorial. Bye. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.